Hey, it's Jordan. Delighted to be joined by Ron Kuby, who's a really well-known defense lawyer in New York, a longtime radio host and media personality, and has been defending Steven Donziger through, at this point, many, many years of attacks by Chevron, private corporate lawyers, private judges, and whatnot. And by my count, Steven's been in prison for 38 days. He went in October 27th. So he's now a little over a month in prison, but there are still developments as far as trying to get him released from prison. And for those coming to this brand new, Steven Donziger is a human rights attorney who successfully, along with others, successfully won a $9.5 billion settlement from Chevron for poisoning parts of the Amazon and Ecuador with their oil waste. So, Ron, there's a lot to get to, but I wanted to start. There was an interesting moment, I believe, 2 days ago in appeals court, because this is being appealed, Stephen's prison being in prison, where the appeals court asked Rita Glavin, who is the private prosecutor with ties to Chevron, basically if Attorney General Merrick Garland had asked her or told her to dismiss the charges, whether she would comply. And I don't know, it took her a long time. It took her a bit of a long time to get to yes.
So your position is that you are subject to the supervision of the Attorney General. So if the Attorney General or the U.S. Attorney called you up tomorrow and said stop prosecuting, you would stop prosecuting. Is that right?
Did you say the U.S. Attorney?
Yeah, it has to be the Attorney General and not the U.S. Attorney?
I would go to main justice, yes.
Okay, so if the Attorney General calls you up and says stop prosecuting,
yes,
you would stop prosecuting?
No, I think you would do what you would do in the normal course of events. I would go to have a meeting at main justice. I would appear before the district court judge, Judge Praska, and if it stopped prosecuting, it's basically asking me to move to dismiss. And typically what happens,
there's the formalities for withdrawing that the Justice Department has to go through, but you're saying that you would act just like an assistant U.S. attorney would act, hearing an order from the Attorney General saying we don't want to do this anymore.
If
right?
Merrick Garland called me up and directed me to dismiss the prosecution, I would bring that to the attention of Judge Praska, and just the way any AUSA does, and say, I have been directed by the Department of Justice. It's pursuant to this.
So, but I understand that there's a procedure, but you're saying that if the policy of the United States was they don't want Mr. Donziger prosecuted, you would abide by that policy?
If they directed me to take that position in court, yes, and I would explain that to the court.
Could you kind of explain what happened in that moment in court the other day?
Yeah, to just take a step back, the legal issue before the court is 6 steps removed from what actually happened, from all of the material facts in the case. It has nothing to do with dead and poisoned Ecuadorians. It has nothing to do with corporate liability. It has everything to do with the appointments clause of the Constitution of the United States, a clause with which most of us don't spend a lot of time wrestling. And the question was whether Rita Glavin is in fact an officer of the United States, because the case was brought in the name of the United States of America. She was appointed by the aggrieved judge. And the question is she an officer? And if she is an officer, she has to be supervised by an officer who's been confirmed by the Senate of the United States. She's an inferior officer. And so she was being asked very directly, because her position now is, yes, of course, I'm subject to supervision by the Attorney General. And so the question is like, okay, the Attorney General calls you up on the phone and says, dismiss this case. You'll dismiss it, right? And she hemmed and hawed and made it clear that that was sort of not her position. Then she was asked, if the President of the United States picks up the phone and says, you are done with this case, proceed no further, you're done, right? And she refused to concede that either. So it's just one of the many odd, quirky turns this case has taken. And it'll be interesting to see what the Second Circuit says. Ironically, for people who follow this jurisprudence, all three of the judges are Trump-appointed judges. They're all, well, two of the three are hardcore Trumpers, and one actually worked for Trump before he was elevated. And the funny thing is, this is an issue that sort of consumes judicial conservatives who don't like the administrative state, who don't like all of these administrators exercising basically freewheeling executive power. So everything that these proto-fascists, if I can call them that, everything they wanted, they got, and it may not help them.
Right. And just so the audience understands, because there's a lot of legal jargon, a
Yeah,
very unusual thing happened here, because essentially Steven Donziger, like I said, the lawyers he was working with, won this historic settlement against Chevron. Chevron refused to pay. They moved all their operations out of Ecuador, and then they went on a corporate crusade against Steven Donziger. And a judge held Steven Donziger in contempt because Steven Donziger would not hand over his computer, his devices, which had attorney-client privilege. The Southern District of New York, very high profile, has been investigating Trump. Their prosecutors refused to prosecute Steven Donziger. But again, in an unusual step, that typically would be the end of it. The aggrieved judge, which Kaplan, which you just mentioned, basically outsourced to a private law firm to then prosecute him on behalf of the United States. So I don't even know the legal aspects here. It sounds cockamamie to me, but it's
admittedly rare, and for very good reason. Just to say it, and you gave a very neutral description of it, to say it makes people say, huh? How in the world can you possibly do such a thing? And there is a rule in the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure that does allow a judge to appoint private prosecutors in cases of contempt. It's not unheard of, but it's admittedly rare. Those individuals, though, those individuals who are appointed have to be, what the law says, rigorously disinterested in the outcome. That is, they have no interest in the outcome outside of the fact they're doing a narrow job of prosecuting. The law firm that was appointed by Judge Kaplan, who himself was a former tobacco company lawyer before he ascended to the federal bench, the law firm that was appointed by him had deep ties to the oil and gas industry. Many oil and gas clients, fossil fuel clients, and had previously represented Chevron. So that would be a no-go in almost any other set of circumstances, but that's what Judge Kaplan did.
Right.
And the irony of this is that Chevron tried to get Steven Donziger prosecuted twice. First, in 2010, they went to the Obama Justice Department. The Obama Justice Department said no. And then Kaplan goes to the Trump Justice Department. And the Southern District of New York not only says no, but they say no through the most transparent lie available to them. They say, we don't have the resources to prosecute this misdemeanor offense. Anybody that knows anything about the Southern District of New York knows they have resources to do whatever they want. They are, we joke, they call themselves the Sovereign District of New York because they do whatever they want to do at any cost. And so Judge Kaplan had to know this was a lie. But instead, he goes ahead, he appoints a private prosecutor. He's allowed to do that. He then handpicks the judge to hear the case, Judge Loretta Preska, who's a very high-ranking member of the right-wing Federalist Society. So now you have the judge who is the aggrieved party, the person who brought the charges, the person who picks the prosecutor, and the person who picks the judge. But just in case something could go wrong, he also remains the judge on the case.
Right.
So just to recap, he is the aggrieved party. He brought the charges. He picked the prosecutor. He picked the judge, and he's also the judge.
And all of them, by the way, either indirectly or directly have ties to Chevron.
Correct.
The Federalist Society has gotten a lot of money from Chevron. I believe Robert Kaplan had investments, private investments in the company.
Lewis Kaplan. That I don't know, but the answer is, why wouldn't he?